Remember, Israel has, I'll repeat what I said, armed and Air Force greater, larger in scale and technologically more advanced than any NATO power outside the U.S. And if they unleash it against Lebanon, okay. As for the Arab League, they've taken mixed positions. For example, Prince Turki al-Faisal, one of the leading figures in Saudi Arabia, and one of those considered the most moderate, pro-American. He gave a very powerful speech at the Gulf Forum a couple of days ago, in which he bitterly condemned the U.S.-Israeli invasion, said we're all Palestinians now, if we have to martyr ourselves to defend the Palestinians, we should do it. Now, the governments aren't doing much, but exactly what are they supposed to do? I mean, they've got to control their own populations, which is hard. It's one of the reasons the U.S. sends them armaments, tons of armaments. And in fact, Israel has always been regarded as part of the defense of the ruling clerics against their populations. But first of all, they're not inclined to oppose U.S. power because they more or less agree with it for themselves. They have no use for the Palestinians, though the population does. And even if they wanted to do something, there's not much they can do. It's pretty hard to stand up against the Godfather. It is. About the only theory I know of in international relations theory that's not trivial or obviously false is that international relations is very much like the mafia. And the Godfather does not brook disobedience and has plenty of ways of reacting to it. And you take your fate in your hands if you do something like vote in an election the way the master doesn't want, let alone interfere in some fashion. So, I don't like their position at all, but it's pretty hard to blame them.
You mentioned one of the reasons for the strong U.S. support of Israel being the military base that they provide us in the Middle East. And it seems that the more support we give to Israel, the less secure the area really is, the less popular America seems to be in that region. And I don't know if there's a point at which our support of Israel will actually undermine our security. So my real question is, can you shed any more light on other reasons that America is so strongly allied with Israel?
Other places it's as strongly allied with?
No, other reasons that U.S. is so strongly allied with Israel besides it being just the best place to park our tanks.
Other reasons why Israel is
so supportive? Oh, I see.
Right.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it causes plenty of anti-American feeling among the population, but nobody cares about that as long as they're under control, and that goes long before, way back, long before U.S. support for Israel. I mean, U.S. support for Israel, as I mentioned, it was always there, but it became really strong. The alliance was really established in 1967. Well, 10 years before that, in 1958, which happened to be a pretty turbulent period there, President Eisenhower inquired with his staff. This is a secret that's been public for a long time. He asked, why is there such a campaign of hatred against us in the Arab world, among the people, not the governments. The governments mostly go along with us. But why is there such a campaign of hatred against us among the people? That's George Bush's "Why do they hate us?" And there was a response. There was an analysis, which had just been produced by the National Security Council, the highest planning council, which explained the reasons. It said there is a perception in the Arab world that the United States opposes democracy and development and supports tyrannies because the United States wants to get control of our energy sources. And it said, basically, the perception's correct, and that's what we ought to be doing. Okay, because, so there's a campaign of hatred against us, but as long as we've got what we want, what do we care? I mean, back to the mafia don. I mean, maybe the people on the street hate him, as long as he can run his affairs. Who cares about the two-legged beasts? And that remains true. And Israel was not an issue at that time. But after 9/11, one newspaper, to its credit, the Wall Street Journal, did a study of opinions among Muslims, not all Muslims, just the ones they cared about, what they called moneyed Muslims, like managers of, multinational corporations and lawyers and people like that. This is after Bush's "Why Do They Hate Us" speech. And they did an analysis of what the opinion was, and they found the same answers. It's not opposition to, globalization or capitalism, so-called capitalism, or, U.S. power or anything. In fact, they're right in the middle of it. It said they found overwhelmingly pretty much what the NSC reported in 1958. They oppose U.S. support for brutal autocracies, its opposition to democracy and development, because of its interest to gain control of our resources. Now, by 2001, they added other reasons. One of them was U.S. involvement in a crushing of the Palestinians. And the second, another topic we're not allowed to talk about here, was the sanctions against Iraq, which were genocidal. Clinton probably killed more Iraqis than Saddam Hussein, and they protested against that. Well, it's kind of like off the agenda here, but
no, she wanted to know what the reasons US supported Israel.
Well, I mentioned some of the reasons, so I'll just go over it again. One is it's a major military base. Two is what I quoted from U.S. intelligence back in '58. It's a logical corollary of U.S. opposition to Arab nationalism to support Israel as the only reliable base in the region. Third is it's very closely integrated with U.S. high tech. That's a big part of the U.S. economy. We ought to know that at MIT. When Microsoft and HP and those guys are in love with Israel, that has an effect on policy. And of course they are in love with it, as you can just tell by investment patterns, for good reasons. It's a nice relationship. Same in other respects. There's an ideological connection, especially among intellectuals, since 1967, since Israel's victory. Now, there are other reasons that go sort of deep in the culture. What Israel's doing and has been doing resonates pretty well with our own history. The forcible and violent displacement of the two-legged beasts and settlement by a superior race, that's American history. Very explicit American history back to the 17th century, and very explicit. And the same is true of the providentialism. You look back over American history and American culture, a very strong theme, all right to the present, and including people who call themselves secular, is that everything that's happening is fulfilling God's will. God has a plan for the universe, and we're filling it. We're carrying out a mission by wiping out the indigenous population, by stealing their lands, by conquering half of Mexico, by invading Vietnam, whatever it may be. We're fulfilling the divine mission. It's providentialism, very strong theme in U.S. culture all the way back. And it's very similar in Israel. If you read, take, say, the book that I mentioned, the book on the settlements, which is a very valuable book. One of its main, a lot of it is concerned with the thinking of the major groups of the settlers, Gush Emunim, who are not marginal in Israel. In fact, they're highly honored as capturing the real essence of Israel and Zionism and what it is. And it's basically providentialist. By settling every inch of the land, we are carrying out God's will. We're bringing the Messiah. If you think Ahmadinejad is extreme, you ought to read American history and the ideology of the settlers. I don't know how to measure it, but I suspect that this resemblance between our own history, what we call our own history, and Israel's settlement, replacement of the two-legged beasts by a superior